Welcome to the C Word, the Conservators podcast. Today we're talking about social media. I'm Jenny Mathiasson, an objects conservator based in South Yorkshire.
I'm Kloe Rumsey, an objects conservator based in Greater Manchester.
And I'm Christina and Rozeik, an objects conservator based in Cambridgeshire.
Right, so today we're talking about social media. I tried defining this to myself and I struggled a little bit because to me it's kind of an organic concept that I kind of understand, but I can't really define. So I looked up a definition on whatis.com. Social media is the collective of online communication channels dedicated to community-based input, interaction, content sharing, and collaboration. And that can mean loads of things, loads and loads. So that can, include platforms like Facebook and Twitter and that sort of thing. And it can go all the way to blogs and wikis and that sort of thing. So it's quite a broad concept. And today we're just going to try to talk a little bit about how conservators actually use social media. So girls around the table, how do you use social media?
I think my use of social media is possibly quite unusual, and looking at our survey results, I think probably quite unusual, because though people seem to often have either a professional X and a personal X. I use Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all as just myself, both professional and personal, and I just don't share things that I wouldn't want everyone to be able to see, if you see what I mean. So I have a couple of different lives that I have adopted. I have my personal, I have conservation, and I have professional belly dance as well, because there's obviously, in the same way as conservation, there is a huge belly dance community in the country and worldwide. So I had Facebook, started using it as personal. There are friends from basically everywhere on there. When I started my Twitter, I set it up as a sort of belly dance one. And then I slowly realized that there was actually a much better community for conservation on Twitter than the community that I was interacting with on Twitter for belly dancing. And Instagram, again, it's just all of what I do generally is just my life, but I just don't post things that I, wouldn't want the world to see. See what I mean? I suppose the difference with me also is that I use Facebook as a tool for managing various different things. So there's obviously my sort of professional belly dance page. We organise, obviously we can talk about this later, but we organise the podcast via Facebook.
Yep.
And I also have pages for my parents, each of my parents who are artists. So I advertise them and have a sort of internet presence for both of them as well. So I don't separate things out at all. But that seems quite unusual looking at people's responses.
Unusual, but not unprecedented. There were other people who said, oh, no, I hadn't really thought of even doing that, so we did have some responses that were totally in line with what you were doing. Yeah,
but I suppose what it comes down to really is that if you want to follow me on any sort of social media, then you're going to have to put, as a conservator, you're going to have to put up with belly dance images and the embarrassment of seeing someone in like full stage makeup and little clothing. And if you're following me as a belly dancer, you're going to have to put up with
lab
photos of
and
swab jars and lab coats and bits of wire.
How about you, Christina?
I guess I'm pretty typical in using different platforms for different things. So Facebook is generally people I know well personally, or at least know personally in some respect. I am actually friends on Facebook with some random conservators that I've never met in person, but who have friended me because we've been in touch in some other way or just because we've kind of heard of each other. But by and large, Facebook is very personal, and I've got my security settings locked down as much as I can, so that people who aren't friends with me are very limited in what they can see. And I think that's partly because I tend to share a lot more kind of personal stuff, a little bit about my family and my personal life, and a bit about my work, but only the kind of stuff that I think would actually interest friends and family. So, like, I got a new job, or I'm involved in this interesting project, or whatever. But I won't share so much kind of general conservation content there. I do follow lots of conservation people on Facebook and organisations and so on, but I don't tend to use it kind of professionally so much. Twitter, on the other hand, I do use more professionally, and I've had a lot of kind of conversations about stuff there. I got more involved in debates, asked people questions. I use it at conferences where there's a conference hashtag and people are posting during the conference and having a bit of discussion there and so on. So I feel for me there's very much a clear distinction there. And the people that I follow on Twitter and who follow me, I may never have met them, but at least we've got these kind of interests in common. Having said that, my Twitter, like Chloe's, is definitely not all conservation, because like Kloe, you know, I do other things. I'm interested in other things as well. And people are just going to have to live with that. It would be, I've been in charge of an institutional Twitter account a couple of times. And it's interesting sort of managing an account which really is just focused on one thing. And where you're sort of very deliberately, I hate to say it, but curating content for that particular purpose, and you're a lot more selective and a lot more aware of what's coming out of it. I think with personal accounts, they tend to be driven by you, your own personality, your own interests, your own activities, and so on.
I feel like I'm sitting somewhere, not in between you, but I feel like I am floating somewhere in between, because I'm not very filtered. It's very much, if you follow me, then you get all of me. It's like, hi, this is what I do. Like, hi, I'm a conservator. I'm also a podcaster. I count bees. I cuddle the occasional cat. You do get a bit of everything. So I feel like on Twitter, it's definitely more of a mishmash. So I'm not one of these people who do only professional things. I do professional things as well. I love participating in conference hashtags, like you mentioned, Christina, and things like Museum Hour every week if I can. So I love doing the professional thing, and sometimes asking questions like, has anyone come across this problem before? How have you solved it? And that sort of thing. So I'm definitely not afraid to use it in a professional capacity at all. It's just, I do everything. Like, it's very raw. It's very me. The only thing I have to say is because I now work in a council setting and there's a general election coming up, I'm very aware that I'm not supposed to be political. And to me, that's difficult because I have a lot of courses and opinions. So I find myself very annoyed at having to filter myself so I don't upset my employer, because I feel like I can't share those things about myself. So they tend to end up more on Facebook, where I can lock down a lot more who sees things. And obviously on Facebook, it's a different crowd, because on Facebook, I know everyone personally. And I ran some numbers. About 20% of the friends I have on Facebook are conservators. And about an additional 22% work in the heritage sector. Heritage, museums, arts, something like that.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, so I'm quite nerdy. So I have lists set up for different categories of friends, and these can be based on geographical location or general interests. So if it's something that's UK-centric, I might filter it to only people living in the UK. But obviously everyone on Facebook already knows me, so they already know that occasionally I will share something that I'm doing professionally, or I won't filter myself very much, and I will post pictures of a cat. You know, it's a different crowd. But on Twitter, I also ran some numbers. So of the people who follow me, so that's not people I follow, but people who follow me, about 22% are conservators. Another 33% on top of that are heritage people. But only 17% of those people are actually friends or people who know me, like in person. So it's a very different crowd I'm catering to. So I'm aware that I'm doing slightly different things. They still get me, but I get that there's a slight difference in how I approach it, because I can't really filter it. I can't tell Twitter, only tell my friends this story about the cat. Now everyone gets the cat. So I do approach it slightly differently, but only because the makeup of the audience is different. I have a public Twitter account because I want to be able to reach people. I get that you can have a private one. I used to have a private one, but that's not really for me anymore. I very much feel like I want to share stuff and I want people to actually see it. And it's less about having conversations with friends because I can do that on Facebook. So, I guess I'm somewhere in between, but I realise there is a difference.
I'm interested in that because I think we've probably got similar kind of numbers of Facebook friends and Twitter followers, but I reckon the makeup of mine, and I'm going to go off and count them now.
Oh, yeah, please do.
but I'm pretty sure that the percentage of conservators and museum people in mine will be much smaller than 45% or whatever yours was. And I think that kind of affects what I feel I want to share, because I'm quite conscious that I know a lot of people from other places, other areas, and they're not necessarily interested in the same kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that is affecting me, and it's exactly what you were saying, Jenny, about being kind of aware of who your audience is. But I'm going to go off and count.
Yeah, please do.
How did you come to those numbers? Because I'm interested in a similar way, but just thinking about my Facebook, with what you were saying, Christina, I think that I only know on Facebook, I'm only connected with conservators that I have met and usually like worked with a little bit in the past. So more sort of as a friend, you would, I've either worked alongside you or in the same department or studied with you, whatever.
That's the case for me as well.
But with belly dancers, I have so many people on my Facebook that know me because of my dancing. And obviously, as I've become more and more well known, it's grown. But I have a vast number of Facebook friends that I don't know, because we're just friends because of the sort of, I guess it's more professional in a way. I follow this person. I'm friends with this person because they, host interesting workshops, and they are friends with me because I do whatever. So I'd really like to get those numbers down for mine and see what the percentage is of belly dancers, normal friends, and conservation. Yeah. And then how many of each...
You should make a Venn diagram.
Yeah. How many of those people do I actually know?
Yeah. But so my rule for Facebook is that I have to know you, or I have to have had a conversation with you. That could have been online, could have been an email, right? It doesn't have to be very much. So, for example, there are now people I'm friends with on Facebook who are conservators but I've never met, but through the podcast they've messaged me. Aww. Or we've exchanged stories, or emerging professional support group kind of crying.
I know those people.
Yeah, hi. So I mean, those people totally exist, but like I have to have had some contact with them. I feel like I've had to have an exchange with people for them to be my Facebook friend, but that's just because I'm like that. As for Twitter, well, obviously anything goes. You can follow me. I have no power over if you follow me or not, like whatever. But yeah, so it's just I just use Facebook slightly differently to that. But then LinkedIn, I'm a lot more relaxed with, even if it's not someone I necessarily know. It might be that
now LinkedIn is a different.
Yeah, you've added me. You look interesting. Sure, why not? Yeah, we can be a connection, I guess.
I'm so bad with LinkedIn.
I think LinkedIn confuses me, but I feel like it's slightly more. It's not as well defined. I feel in a way. It's clearly a professional network, but at the same time, I'm not entirely clear on how the networking is supposed to actually work.
Yeah, I have a lot of people on or I have had lots of people on LinkedIn sort of friend me, if that's what
I think you connect. Yeah. You're connecting
with me because they know me personally. But I'm never really sure whether I should connect with them because it's for my conservation career. So
I'm unclear on that as well. So I have a very mishmashy LinkedIn where it's like, these are people I'm friends with, or these are people I once went to school with, and we're definitely not in the same sector at all. So it looks like I have an awful lot of connections, but it's actually like, well, these people, I went to university with them for a year.
What do you do, Christina, with LinkedIn? Do you use LinkedIn?
Yes, I do, a lot. I tend to use it purely for professional purposes. I do have people wanting to connect with me who I know from outside of conservation, but I'm very conscious that it's a kind of professional networking platform for me. And the people who are trying to connect with me from elsewhere are probably doing so because they've given LinkedIn access to their email contact list. And it just, if you do that, it just kind of suggests people who are on there who are already in your email address book, but who aren't necessarily connected with you professionally.
So should we move on to the survey? So we recently put together a little survey that we asked conservators to respond to about how they use social media, just in general, just so we could get a better idea of what people out there are actually doing. And very kindly, we got some respondents. Thank you. If you filled it out, thank you so much. And as it turns out, overwhelmingly, the social media platforms you use are Facebook and Twitter, followed slightly by Pinterest, slightly less by Instagram. We have a couple of Tumblr, and then other, which I'm not really sure what that would be. We also asked what type of social media account you use. If it's a personal one, so something in your own name, an institutional or organizational one, so something like a museum or a studio account, an alternative account, which could be an alias, or just other, and we asked people to explain. Overwhelmingly, people use their personal accounts, but some people did have personal and institutional, so it was a mix, just to keep things divided. And I mean, I know personally I run an organizational one, a Twitter account that's for work, like work, and one that's, just me. And they do have incredibly different content. So it's just like you were saying, Christina, about how differently you curate these different tweets when it's what I'm now speaking as a conservation unit, trying to show off that we do good work. That is an incredibly, it's a very different experience. I don't feel nearly that restricted when I post just as me. I'm quite happy to, I guess I'm quite happy to upset people in my own personal capacity as just me.
If you would.
Yeah. Sometimes
I think, something that came across in the answers is a lot of, when we ask what people don't share,
yes.
A lot of people are very unhappy about sharing anything to do with politics. Or anything that might be seen as contentious or offensive to other people. And I think that's even more so when you're running an institutional account rather than your personal one.
Definitely.
People tend to shy away from anything remotely contentious.
Yeah,
well,
definitely.
yeah, I suppose especially if I've worked in Jenny in the situation you're in now, and I've been in a situation previously where you're told by the institution, don't be political, guys. And I suppose if you're speaking as yourself, that's one thing. But if you're speaking as the institution itself, then you certainly shouldn't.
No, certainly. But I feel like it's in many ways easier to detach myself from personal opinions when I know that I'm doing it as the brand.
Yeah, well, no, yeah. If no one knows
similarly,
it's you as your name, you're not putting your name to this.
And similarly, I help with the museum Facebook page overall. And anything I put on there, it might have a slight personal touch to it. Like, this is something I care about and I think we should talk about it. But it's never, this is my course, let's talk about it. Like, it's a lot easier to distance yourself from being an individual if you know that you're doing it in an institutional setting. As for I feel like I could never stop being me if I'm saying I'm Jenny Mathiasson, conservator. There will never be a Twitter account where you will not have any flavor of me and where I'm just like, look at my amazing before and after pictures. That is not who I am. I am a hot mess and I'm happy to share it. No, but I just feel like I can't strip out those bits of me if I'm me. There is at no point do I feel like I put on a cape and become a different person when I'm a conservator. I don't feel like I have now donned the coat. I will now cease to be Jenny and I am the conservator. I never feel like that. I always feel like I'm at all times me, being a conservator, or being a crafter, being a podcaster, being a writer, whatever it is. At all times is me at the core, not some sort of shell. And so to a certain degree, I admire people who came forward in this survey and said things like, oh yeah, I just completely just do this one thing and that's all I do. And I don't involve politics, religion, opinions of any kind. I have no opinions about anything. And it's like, wow, I cannot do that.
But there are always taboo. Like some of the other things that people said that they never post are also really interesting. Like the sort of generally agreed taboo subjects of we could literally get into trouble for talking about this or sharing stuff like human remains insensitive. any sort of, I suppose, ethically nuanced situation, or, you know, if you're working in an ethnographic museum, anything that you have an understanding that has, you know, slightly awkward connotations in the same way that human remains do. Also copyright, any existing copyright, or like,
so someone did bring that up, that if it's something that's complicated in terms of copyright, then they wouldn't post it. And I'm like, oh yeah, I can totally see that.
I think I'm interested in also people's opinions in sharing the less desirable, for example, storage situations or lab situations, or things that aren't like the look at my clean white desk. Like, look at this beautifully organised everything.
Oh, that's interesting, because that was also something that came through in these results, where it's something you wouldn't share. People said things that would be embarrassing to my institution. So, you know, something being held together by sellotape, or rubbish storage, or that sort of thing. And I can certainly agree with. I try not to share that sort of thing. It's a tricky one.
I think that sort of thing, I mean, I don't know if you guys agree, but I feel like that sort of thing should be. It's helpful for it to be shared, because for a start, it makes people feel less alone.
That's true.
And also it means that, you know, if you're so deeply into a storage problem that you can't see how to get out of it, then if you post a photo and go, look, I'm struggling here, you might have a couple of comments back saying, hey, just do this, it'd be fine.
Yeah. So,
or, hey, don't worry, mine is also like that.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I think the problem with that, though, is that social media is often very unnuanced. If you're posting this without all the extra kind of context that goes with it and so on, then it's very easy for people to jump on these things and misconstrue them or misunderstand them. And then it really does end up making your institution look bad. I mean, to some extent, you can put the stuff out there, but you can't control what people do with it.
No, absolutely.
No, that's true.
And the more kind of contextual information you can give with it, the better, but social media isn't always set up for that, and things like Twitter and Instagram really, really aren't set up for that. So I can totally understand why people are wary about sharing the bad sides as well.
But at the same time, maybe it would be in some ways healthy if we actually had an outlet for it.
I suppose in these times of struggling with funding, we were more open about the struggles that we're having, and actually showing the actual visual, physical result of struggles, then it would be more honest. But then again, I suppose, I mean, I remember seeing in a conference, there was a conference paper about this. Pretty much, it was about storage. Of look at this bad storage situation. This is what we did, and this is what we weren't able to do. Maybe actually, well, obviously, a conference is more of a controllable situation, but.
Yeah, depending on what
you do sort of, I suppose, have to bottle it up until you have the opportunity to say, help me, help, I've got stuff.
Yeah, but then I also feel like in a conference situation, you also have the problem where you need to get it past your employer. I mean, hey, I want to show how shit we are. Could I do that? I mean, so there are many problems with what you could potentially share, obviously, which certainly came across in your answers. Now, people had some very different ideas of how we can actually share things. Another thing we asked, by the way, was if people had multiple accounts, and the 35% or thereabouts said no, they didn't. Like they had only a personal account or only a professional account. They didn't have several. And I fall into the category of I have several accounts, but that's only because I also manage the conservation studio one.
And the podcast.
Yes, quite. And also some shops, because I'm insane. Yeah, so others cited that, yes, they did have multiple accounts because they needed to divide work and personal life. It was interesting to see what people answered for how people use the different platforms and what they share on them. So Facebook tended to be more personal, more silly, more quizzes, more memes, more cute cat pictures, more about family, more about politics, and more to ask questions, not to their friends, because I assume that I'm an outlier and that I have loads of conservation and heritage friends, because I quite regularly ask conservation friends conservation questions on Facebook, because I can filter it to just them. Hey friends, what the hell is this? Or like, is there anyone providing a training course on blank? Because I have no idea. Has anyone heard of anything? You know, that sort of question. But interestingly, people did say that they used a lot of Facebook groups to ask other conservators for help on Facebook. So it's a little bit mixed, but it tends to be more personal. For Twitter, it tended to be a lot more business focused, a lot more conservation news, profile raising. Yeah, so it tended to be more about that, and posting teasers, which I thought was quite a sweet way of putting it. So,
I liked that.
A little bit of, here's a nugget, we're doing some research, not going to tell you any more than that, and that sort of thing, right? Which I thought was an interesting way of using. So it is basically marketing, but in a kind of clever conservation way, which I kind of liked. And similarly, things for upcoming exhibitions, like, hey, we're working on an object, you can come see it in a couple of weeks, that sort of thing.
I'm quite conscious, actually, that the way and now you mention about marketing, that the way I use, in particular, Twitter has changed. Because when I worked for an institution that didn't really have big social media presence, I used to post more of my day-to-day work. So pictures of objects I was working on and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they get retweeted by other institutions or even by people at my institution and then eventually by the institution. But once they're built up a big social media presence of their own, we were very much encouraged to post that stuff under the institution's own account, and not us as individuals, even though it might say on my profile, I'm a conservator who works for such and such a museum. We were kind of really discouraged from going out and doing stuff ourselves as individuals to do with our day-to-day work at that museum, because it was kind of like taking the likes away from that museum or what. I don't know what the rationale was, but No,
I can totally see that happening.
I mean, if you at its worst, it's kind of like a squabble for likes and a kind of fight over who gets the likes or whatever. At its best, I suppose engagement as being having a more focused social media presence and not dissipating that. So I can kind of see both sides. I mean, now I'm doing a lot more private work. And I do training and private conservation and consultancy. And so now I actually feel a bit freer to post stuff on my own account about my day-to-day work. But on the other hand, because it's now on behalf of private individuals who are paying me directly, I now kind of feel a bit more constrained than I did when I was working for a museum.
No, that's totally an interesting point.
So I feel more of a kind of direct relationship with the people who are employing me to do this stuff, and more kind of responsibility. So actually, I'm posting more conservation work sometimes, but I feel more constrained about what I do there. So that's a bit weird. Doesn't stop me promoting the training courses I'm doing. So.
Well, no, obviously, come on, we all got to live. Similarly, people said Instagram was a bit more public. Some people preferred it to Twitter because it allows more text, although some people conversely said it's not really built for text, it's more built for hashtags. So I can't bear those Instagram posts with like 50 hashtags. No. I personally, I'm not on Instagram, but so it's more searchable because of the hashtags. So people preferred that to Twitter, even though both have hashtag systems. And people said that Instagram was more, you didn't expect anything back. You might get the occasional like or follower, but it isn't the same kind of dialogue situation. Nobody's going to message you and be like, hey.
It's more limiting in that respect, isn't it?
So it's more about generating content, not actually getting any feedback, or not very detailed feedback. So that was interesting. Pinterest, people tended to use it pretty much only for personal users, not for museum users.
I'm on Pinterest. I use Pinterest every day, and I've got thousands of pins.
Wow.
I use it a lot for recipes and meal planning and kind of boring stuff like that, gardening, other interests and so on. And I do have some conservation boards.
Oh, wow. Cool.
But they are private. I feel, funnily enough, with conservation ones, I kind of want to keep them private, and I'm not quite sure why that is. Whether it's just that they're so different from the kind of bulk of my pins on Pinterest that it's just not really interesting to the other people who follow me, or whether it's because they're often things to do with very kind of private projects. If I'm putting together a paper and doing some research for that, I'll often use it as a way of just kind of gathering things that I don't want to forget about, or websites that I don't want to lose. And it's the most efficient way for me of storing that information. But I kind of feel quite strongly, actually, that it's not for public consumption, and I'm not quite sure why.
Oh, interesting.
Why I feel that so much.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. I use Pinterest for, like you, things like recipes and clever ways of gardening and that sort of thing. And like,
oh my god, life hacks.
Yeah, life hacks. And,
storage hacks.
And DIY projects and craft projects. I also use it as my wish list because I couldn't find a good way of putting a wish list together that was somewhere a bit neutral. So I also have a wish list board on there. But I would love to hear from anyone if they use it for more conservation purposes. It's really interesting. Finally, Tumblr. People said Tumblr was more about, interestingly, fandom and art for them. So it was less, it was more visual and more silly often. So not very serious, which I thought was kind of interesting. Moving on to what kind of things people share on social media, because that's something we asked. What do you share? What do you put out there? We got a really wide variety of responses. So it was things like before and after images, job adverts, events, new exhibitions coming up, useful articles, conservation cleverness, in progress projects, videos of treatments. I've not really seen a lot of them, but that's cool. Podcasts, yes. Keep doing that. Things that professional bodies share, government papers and bills related to museums, that sort of thing. And I'm like, wow, now we're getting very hardcore. Research teasers, as we already talked about, publications, emerging professional discoveries, which I really liked. Some people also share funnies, geeky stuff, equipment, like I found this amazing thing. This is how to use it. I love that. That's great. There should totally be more of that. Analysis images, promotion of stuff going on in-house in museums and studios, like training courses and exhibitions and that sort of thing. And the fun side of conservation and positive heritage stories. I thought that was really nice. Yeah. I was like, oh, yes, that's amazing. Please share more of that. That's amazing. So it was a really good mix of what people do share. And then we go into what people don't share. And there we're talking more things like bad conservation advice. That one came up a lot. So when it's someone's article about, hey, this is how to put Brasso on things. And hey, do you want to clean a painting with some bread? It's, so that sort of thing was certainly discouraged, which is good.
Politics, religion, strong opinions.
Very, very strong. Yeah, definitely politics came up a lot.
I loved the response that was, I don't share personal info, i.e. not the cat or baking.
Yes, I thought that was very sweet.
I want to hear about your cat and your baking.
Yeah, I thought that.
Someone else put beauty.
Yes, I saw that one and I was like, no, I suppose I definitely don't share that, but it's not really a conscious decision. People said things like charitable appeals, courses, that sort of thing. Research not yet published, which is I can see that.
So that ties in with my secret Pinterest board.
Yes, it does a bit. It does a bit actually.
So it's not just me.
No, it's not just you at all. Negativity, which I thought was interesting. Motivational images. I love that. It's like okay, like no posters going. You can do it.
Someone else said they don't like generic memes or just hang in that, and I like that as well.
No slander, no cute animals, no clickbait, no protected or personal information. Mm-hmm. Yeah, fair enough. That's just sensible. Data protection, people.
Oh, now this one was interesting. High value or sensitive specimens. And I know when I was managing an institutional account, we were very careful about not doing anything that might compromise security. So we weren't just conscious about our image as an institution and not wanting to show kind of mouldy objects in store or whatever, but we were also quite careful about showing where these things could be found or anything that might make it possible for people to go and steal them, basically.
Yes, I feel like
lovely stuff we have.
I feel like that's,
but it is a worry. It's on this shelf in the store here.
Yeah. No, I feel like that is a worry, and sometimes I feel like management might put a lot of time worrying into that sort of thing. Actually, as for I kind of don't care. Oh no.
I suppose if you have also made the location of the stores available.
Then it's a bit sensitive. I mean, I'd never do anything like that, right? But
No.
At the same time, I think it's an interesting thing to note that I literally never know when it's a high-value object. I don't have that information. That information is not on the database. It's not anywhere I can access it as a conservator. So I automatically treat everything as it's worth loads, or, it's worth an equal fictional amount.
All objects are equal.
Yeah, because I have no information at all. That could be the last thing in existence. It could be the first of its kind. It could be one of 3 dozen. I have no idea. I don't get that information, and I'm fine with that. So for me, that doesn't even come into the equation unless someone rushes in at any point and goes, "You better not tell anyone about that painting because it's very valuable, madam." Then I'd stop, But, I guess for me, it's an interesting one because I wouldn't even know.
I'm interested by the person who said they don't share photographs.
Yes, that was it was just kind of a one-liner, no photographs.
Yeah.
Not at all.
And I'd love to know, does that mean literally no photographs of anything ever, which is quite extreme from a social media point of view, or does it mean no photographs of treatments in progress or no photographs related to conservation? I don't know. If you were that person, let us know.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to know if you go really, really hardcore with that rule, that nothing ever, or is it just nothing within the lab, or yeah. No, that one's interesting. Human remains came up that people wouldn't share, and they said human tissue, so that it's almost it's almost more broad. I mean, I know that we've had this conversation before about human remains and what constitute human remains. So for me, it is already a broad term, but the way they phrased it makes me think that it's indeed anything that comes from a human, and that's interesting. And I've heard that said before, that they wouldn't share anything with that. And
that sounds to me also like, I know we mentioned this a little bit earlier, but it sounds to me also that it's more to do with their take on it is more to do with discretion of, or the privacy of the individual from whom the tissues came, rather than, I don't want to insult or upset anyone, so I'm not going to post something recognizable. Like if you had, a piece of leather looking stuff and posted that, but for the most part people won't be able to tell that it's from it's human. But the fact that it's that's interesting, that it's for the protection of the remains rather than the viewer. And I mean I kind of feel like each to their own on that one, because it's up to you to filter yourself. It's really interesting, because I know that some people have really strong opinions, like they will never share anything. As I think I am more cautious if I am the actual origin of something, by which I mean if it's my photo of a mummy's uncovered face. I might hesitate to tweet that, because that is public and to everyone, and I might feel a bit differently about that. But for example, I'm quite happy to share The Guardian or the BBC having an article about human remains where that's the cover photo. Yeah.
Then I'm totally okay with it. And it's an interesting one where it's like, this comes from someone else, so I'm okay with it. But it's still equally upsetting to people if they see, dead body. It's still upsetting to people, but I don't care if it's... I
don't care.
No, but it's, I kind of filter it differently. I'd think twice if it was me holding a skull.
I suppose it's because it's already been vetted by a large
institution. I guess so. Yeah, I guess that's kind of how I feel about it, where it's, even though people will obviously be upset, but then people would be upset by loads of things, and I can't help them. But you can worry about what you put on social media, and it becomes really clear in the survey results that some people spend an awful lot of time worrying. Like, they're really, really thinking very hard before they post anything. As where, I guess I'm okay with if someone gets a bit upset by something I say at some point. I don't want anyone to be upset constantly by everything I say. I'm not saying I want to speak only in profanity and, only post disturbing images. That's not who I am. But at the same time, I can take responsibility for everyone's well-being everywhere. So I guess I take a more relaxed view about what I'm doing, but clearly a lot of people worry a lot. Other things people don't, and I especially love this person, whoever you are, who said, I don't share anything emotional ever. It's like, whoa, like, how do you stay that neutral? Is that you only publish research? Like, is that the level we're at? Like, nothing emotional ever. No, I'm having a good day. This is a nice cup of coffee, you know. Like, I'm just wondering where that line goes.
Yeah, what does emotional mean?
So we also asked what the best examples you've seen of conservation on social media, and also the worst. Now, a category of best, people liked varied content, treatments, seeing people's labs, which I also enjoy.
I enjoy that.
I enjoy that a great deal. I love seeing where people work. Podcasts, yes. X-ray images. I do love a good X-ray image. I do love that.
Yeah, me too.
I think I like it because it's not accessible to me. It's like, oh, look, it's a sneak peek inside something. I never get to do that. Something that did come through as well was people genuinely appealed to other people to share more content. Like, people should share more, which was really sweet. I really loved that about the survey, where people were like, no, more content is good. It's, you know, keep sharing. It's very brave, so keep doing it. And it's just like, lovely. Oh, you
enriching
guys,
our community.
You guys, you make me happy. And then we had people, obviously time lapses were something that people probably loved. And then there were shout outs to more individual things like the Horniman Walrus. Not a Twitter account I'm aware of, but I love it. Pit River's storage review, where they apparently do a lot of kind of inviting people in and, you know, really showing stuff.
A few people mention the Art Conservation Advocates group on Facebook, which is an interesting one because I think it's a closed group and it is intended purely for conservators. And so
it's
a lot
not
of stuff
one I'm a member
gets,
of, so
it is good, and it has got a lot of very conservation specific stuff. So
excellent. I might check that out.
I might check that out too.
Yeah,
I'm not a member.
Other things that got a shout out: NYU Library Conservation Lab, V&A blog, the Met's Instagram, the AIC Facebook group. Smithsonian Libraries did a video blog recently, apparently, which was supposed to be very good. Westdean College on Twitter got a shout out. And a couple of Instagram accounts. Thomas von Kampen's Instagram account and Fleve is what I've put down. I think there was Francesca Levy, I think. Their Instagram accounts got very, good mentions. They were like, oh, I really like these guys. So, hey, well done, guys. Very well done. In terms of what people didn't like, Museum Week.
Laugh.
Museum Week got a slight slating. Because sometimes it's a bit dire. And I get that they try to appeal to the entire museum sector. So it's hard to maybe satisfy conservators with the type of hashtags they use. But hey.
I think a lot of people didn't like things that showed conservation in a bad light. So people kind of sharing misleading conservation advice or out-of-date stuff. But someone specifically mentioned nail polish in conservation photos.
That was great. People didn't like heavily regulated museum content. So when it's been really, really, really approved, when it's a bit too safe and nice, where it's like, do you never do anything to your objects? Like, is it always this nice? Like people want to see a bit of a mix, I think.
Yeah, people want to see behind the scenes.
On the other hand, someone said, in general, I think conservators new to social media are not good at it, e.g. boring content or blurry pictures.
Yes,
so I think there's some kind of
like,
middle ground to be reached there between the extremely tightly locked down and focused and polished content, and at the other end something that's really kind of unprofessional and basically not very helpful or interesting.
Yeah, so people also mention diluted institute accounts, but by that I'm guessing they mean when it's a museum account and they have to post things about, we're doing a toddler group today. Oh, and we do some conservation. And then we're going to talk about the dementia group that's coming in. And then we're going to talk about this other event that we're doing. I'm guessing that's what they mean by diluted content, that it's never going to be collections care all the time. I'm assuming. But they could have meant something else. And if you did, get in touch. You can still be anonymous. Don't worry about it. People didn't like people who only retweeted things. They quite liked if people did actually put out some of their own content as well. All beige pictures. I really loved that one. Did you see that one, Christina?
No, I didn't.
Oh, yes. Let's see if I can find that one very quickly.
I got the sense that a lot of conservators don't like content which gives away too many details about the actual practice of conservation. So people are very happy to share before and after photos, and they're happy to share some limited amount of information about objects they're working on. But a lot of people felt very uncomfortable about giving away too many details about the actual practical work involved, and the materials that are used and methods that are used and so on. And I think that's interesting, obviously getting that balance right, being very aware that there would be people looking at this stuff. You can't control who looks at it necessarily, and some of the people looking at it may well go and try and put this stuff into practice.
Do you think that's because people are protective of their methods, or do you think any of it has anything to do with a sort of embarrassment of their practices or a self-doubt?
I don't think it's either necessarily. I think it is also that people feel somehow responsible for what people might go and do with this information.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
And that you could put something out there saying, okay, I cleaned this with a 50-50 mixture of acetone and water and swabbed it or whatever. And they're quite understandably uncomfortable about the fact that someone else might go off and do that. And it's all very well for a conservator to make a decision to clean something with that kind of mixture, because they may well have done testing. They will have some kind of understanding of how the materials involved will interact with some of the conservation materials. But other people might not do that. My sense was that it was a worry about a little information being a dangerous thing, a little knowledge.
Yeah. Oh, I found that thing now. Worst.
Oh, cool.
Beige. Paper, watermarks, objects. I just love this notion that everything's brown. Although that is slightly the challenge you have with archaeological conservation, because everything tends to be quite brown.
I guess, yeah, this is more of an issue for kind of book and paper conservators, probably, rather than... It's a really interesting point, actually, though, because social media thrives on variety and novelty.
But then if your audience is also book and paper conservators or archaeologists, then they're going to find those, ever so slightly different looking sediments or ever so slightly different looking paper really fascinating.
Yeah, sure. I mean, after 20 years as a paper conservator, you can probably perceive more shades of beige than the average person, but...
Then we asked people if they had professional discussions via social media. And that could be asking questions, or asking for advice, or that sort of thing. And the answer was, well, about 18% said no. Like, it's not the right forum for it at all. And they tended to immediately go with, I just go to the dist list if I have a question. And some of that seemed to be down to a fear of senior conservators or experienced conservators maybe not being on social media, so they don't see the question. And I thought, that's interesting. I'll probably be harsh.
That's a fair point, actually, though. Because quite often, when I've worked in places, the senior people who might well be the people with a lot of knowledge to contribute to these kinds of discussions, they're not on social media. I mean, which is not to say that everyone over 50 is not on social media, but a lot of the people I've worked with haven't been.
Yeah, so I can see that. But then I'm also really curious to see what the response rate is from dist list, because it might be that, because at some point someone did bring up that they felt the dist list wasn't very good for discussion. Like, you might get one or two replies, but not anything that was actively helpful. So I wonder if on the dist list people don't actually reply to the list. Maybe people get more responses in person if they just email the original person, or if it is generally just that it's a bit potluck if people ever reply to your question. I'm really curious to know, but obviously we can't measure that. So
I have nothing to add to that except to say that I absolutely loved a typo about this, which is where someone referred to the conservation dust list.
Yes, that was brilliant.
Which
quite happy.
I think so sounds like something aimed at preventive conservation. So guys, if you ever want to set up a preventive conservation specific mailing list, please call it the dust list.
Yes, please do. In general, though, people were quite... people could be a bit reluctant to share specifics on social media. If someone asks a question, they might not be happy to say, oh, yeah, just put cellulose nitrate on that. Like they wouldn't go into necessarily specifics or even methods, So it varied how useful people found asking questions and having these discussions on social media was. But people were happy to share comments and anecdotes and follow-up questions, start debates, share opinions, and sometimes share advice. So I thought that was quite encouraging. And I kind of feel like that is very much something that I do. Like, I'll throw a question out there if I feel like it's appropriate. And often I do. But it does depend. I might, again, share something on Facebook to people who are conservators because it's kind of locked down there, rather than on Twitter. But it depends. If I need to cast a wider net, I might ask something on Twitter, depending on what it is and if anyone might feel that it's too sensitive to ask about. And someone very sweetly said, I only share encouragements or say hello to people. It's like, oh,
that person sounds lovely.
Yes. Yeah. Mostly people in their 30s replied to our survey, apparently, but the age range was between 20s and 60 plus, so it was really encouraging. 92% were female. Surprise, surprise.
That is I really liked that little demographic thing. It fits so nicely in with our first episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, interesting. You say mostly people in their 30s. Actually, nearly 80% of people were 39 and under.
Yeah.
Which is really quite a young demographic and younger than the profession overall. So I don't know if that reflects the people who listen to the C word or whether it reflects the people who are conservators but who are on social media and therefore would be inclined to answer a survey like this. So
yeah, quite. But yeah, but I am still pleased that we got, people, in the 60 and above age bracket, for example. So I'm pleased with the spread. Yeah. So thank you to everyone who filled out our survey. We really appreciate it. Please don't feel like we took the piss too badly out of you. You're all anonymous. we don't know who you are. So we may agree or disagree on a few of these points, but it was amazing to have the data. Thank you so much. We'll probably be tweeting and sharing some nice graphics that I'll throw together about this in a way to kind of share what we found out. If you're interested in more general resources on social media and museum settings, you can check out the MCN's YouTube channel where they put up recordings of lectures and talks from their conferences. I believe that stands for Museum Computer Network, but I could be wrong. And they're in America, but they're an excellent resource. They have actually loads of videos on other people's social engagement, but it has to be more museum-wide, not conservation-specific. But just as a side note, we'll bung a link to that in the show notes.
Next up, here's an interview with Fiona McLees and Alex Walker from the Bodleian Library. Fiona and Alex are two of the people behind the Bodleian's popular social media feeds, and they spoke to me recently about how they manage their growing social media presence.
Hello, I'm Fiona and I'm a paper conservator at the Bodleian. And I'm Alex and I'm the preventive conservator at the Bodleian Libraries. So we've been using Twitter and Instagram at the Bodleian for just over a year now. We started in March 2016. This was after being initially put onto Twitter from our head of conservation, who set up her own account. And then as a department, we started a department-wide Twitter and Instagram accounts to represent the work that we were doing across the department, and with a small team of conservators that would look at putting the information on the accounts, sharing pictures. And this team was formed by myself, Fiona, and our colleague Andrew Honey. So it's a spread across the three teams within the conservation department, the book, paper and preventive teams, so that we can ensure we've got a sort of wide variety of images and information to share with the world.
how did you come to choose Instagram and Twitter as your sort of platforms for this?
We chose Instagram mainly because of the wealth of images that we have and we generate from conservation. A lot of these are kind of very niche, behind the scenes pictures that we aren't usually able to show people on tours. We're not able to show them in a lot of our sort of academic papers that would require much more detail. So it's quite a nice informal way to show all these images that are constantly coming out of our conservation workshop. And Twitter is better for sharing information rather than images. So
yeah, and I think also we discussed Twitter a little bit. In fact, it came out of updating some of our conservation web pages, which we're starting to do not just on the website, but in doing that, thinking about how time consuming it was to update those pages and put case studies on and some of the other content that we have there, which is when we started thinking about Twitter. But then Alex had been looking on Instagram and found some, particularly in the States, some Instagram accounts for some of the studios there.
So it came out of wanting to have a big impact with a sort of minimum amount of time in a way.
Yeah, exactly. And also to some extent to try and speed up the steps by which we can get information out. It's not the main part of our jobs, obviously. So we don't want to spend hours writing long bits of text, basically.
So have you found it limiting in any way compared with updating your web pages? Because obviously a picture can give quite a lot of information, but you don't get the same amount of context.
I think we try and work with the limitations that, particularly Twitter, where you have, I think it's 150 characters of text. So being sort of forced to come up with a caption that or a piece of information that fits within those Twitter boundaries has actually been quite useful. So it means that we're not spending much time working on these. But with Instagram, we can put more detailed captions. But again, because we're only showing one image, we're not going into huge amounts of detail. But I think it's letting the image speak for itself in a lot of occasions.
And I think for our purpose and who we imagine some of our audience might be, it does the right job for us, because we also felt that there's potentially a risk in supplying too much treatment information to people. People are often tempted to have a go themselves, and we don't necessarily want to give all the information for that.
So do you have any idea who your audiences are?
If you go deep into Twitter analytics, you can find out quite a lot about your followers. So what we did find is that the most common age range for our followers was the 25 to 34 age group, which probably isn't much of a surprise as that rematches the ages of most social media users. And also the majority of our followers are in the UK. So, the age groups that we are lacking are the 13 to 17-year-olds that probably don't know conservation exists, and the 55 to 64-year-olds.
Analytics can also give you information about the performance of your posts as well. Mm-hmm. So have you got a feel now for what kind of content it reaches the biggest audience, what kind of things most popular? And so
yeah, I think definitely on Instagram we do. It's quite clear what kind of posts do well there. And we found pretty quickly that posting pictures predominantly of people, if it was, I don't know, here's our new member of staff or something, it was not hugely popular. It's a nice thing to do, but obviously if people don't recognise any of the people in the photo, it's of very little interest to them. Whereas photos of processes actually taking place. One of the things that we really found is that photos of end banding on books is pretty much a hit. We've tried to keep a variety of different kinds of shots. So sometimes macro or microscope images, as alongside of the more standard photos. And then we've also tried with little videos and time lapse and things like that. The most popular Instagram post was one of end banding, but then some of the other ones are not necessarily even of the objects we work with. So there was one of a fibre repair technique that was really popular, and then one of a box full of bone folders.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so it's been a variety of things on Instagram. I think on Twitter it's harder to tell what's going to be picked up and what isn't, because so much of it is maybe more reliant on the time of day it goes out and how much other stuff is appearing in someone's Twitter feed.
I'm interested that you're not using Facebook, which is probably the most popular social media platform. Is there a reason you don't have a Facebook page as well?
I think well, personally anyway, I thought it would just be too much work, possibly. Instagram, as we were saying earlier, is lends itself much more naturally, I think, to the work that we're doing, and then putting an image up is much easier. Whereas even with Twitter, to think of something that imports a message or gives a story about our work in 140 characters we find a bit harder. And I think again, as I was saying, it can't become a huge part of our daily work, and that obviously the more forms you add in, then just the more work it's going to be ultimately to keep them all updated and looking fresh. I mean, I think the other thing that the Bodleian Library, the main Bodleian Library's communications team use to great effect is Tumblr, and perhaps that's something that we could be using. But again, I think we're finding that having 2 accounts is probably enough for us at the moment.
Sure. So how much time are you finding it does take? I think you said there are 3 of you managing these accounts primarily.
Yeah, so there's 3 of us that will write the posts and share the posts. The rest of the department will contribute images if they think that they're working on something interesting, or they've come up with some nice images and think, oh, that'll be perfect for Instagram. But in terms of actually recording the amount of time we spend, we don't do that. It's quite hard to work out exactly how much time we are using the social media, because it's sort of as and when posts come about that we'll put them online. So it's short bursts of time rather than an allotted sort of hour a week or half an hour a week each.
So do you have a plan for your posting and so on? I guess a social media strategy. Do you schedule things? Do you aim to do a certain number of posts a week?
We had initially, when we were starting the accounts, we had written a sort of mini strategy and guidelines for ourselves. And I think in that we'd originally put it that we would do 3 Instagram posts a week, but I don't think we were specific about Twitter, because obviously if you're retweeting and so on, it's difficult. You're not going to count that up. But I think at the moment it's probably, we're not doing as many as that. We're maybe doing 1 or 2 a week, and it comes in flurries a little bit, that some weeks we will each put something up from our different teams, and then other weeks might be a bit fallow. But it seems to work fairly naturally that we have enough going around. And I think, as I say, with Instagram, it's less important than it is with Twitter to keep on putting new things up, because people search Instagram and find a post from several months ago in a way that you don't quite do with Twitter. So I think that you don't need such a high frequency, we kind of feel. But no, it's ended up being more organic. One of the other things that we'd put in our kind of guideline strategy was that we wanted any images we were sharing to specifically say something about conservation. And obviously, working here with the amazing collections we have, we could easily just be posting pictures of beautiful things or interesting things or whatever. But we really wanted to make sure we avoid that, and that each image we use does actually say something about our job and isn't just a picture of an illumination in a manuscript. And if it is that, then the caption says the pigments on this are flaking and we're looking at treating, has some conservation content. But we really wanted to make sure we kept definition as a conservation team, that this is about our work and not just attractive things.
And are there things you deliberately choose not to say about conservation or not to show? You mentioned sort of detailed treatments and so on.
So the other thing is we have an arrangement in place, partly as one of the ways to make it easier for us to share this kind of stuff, that we don't have to put all our images and captions through loads of different people to get agreement to put it up. But we do contact the curator of each collection when we're showing an object from their collection to just agree with them that they're happy for us to do that. And I think occasionally there's been a stopping point there where they haven't wanted to show something for whatever reason, sometimes just due to copyright issues or ownership of the images or things like that. But I think very occasionally it's because someone else in the library feels we shouldn't show something in a really poor condition, perhaps. Whereas we feel, well, we're showing it in poor condition, that's part of our job and that's part of what we're working with and why we're here. But I think occasionally there could be a curator who would really prefer that we're not showing the Bodleian libraries with things in poor condition. And I think we haven't thankfully had very many negative comments at all on Twitter or Instagram, but I think some of the ones that we have had have said things like, I can't believe that things in the Bodleian are in this kind of condition. So I can understand that is a concern for our communications department and how we show ourselves, that as conservators we do want to show people the kind of state of objects that we work with, but then also as part of a really important, well-known institution, finding the balance between what we feel free to share and maybe what people could get upset about. In the instance where someone has said, I can't believe this is in such bad condition, it does give us then another opportunity to respond to them and explain what it is that we're doing and how it is that we work, the kind of work that we do here. And we've then been able to respond to things like that and hopefully make someone a bit more aware.
You said this started sort of initially as a way of reaching people without the large amount of time that it takes to update all your web pages and so on. Are you finding that you're just not updating your website now and that the social media has taken over instead? Or do you find that there are still things that you would like to put online on your website because social media isn't quite the right outlet for them?
I think we are carrying on to update our web pages. One of the areas we concentrate on is we have an area for case studies, and I think that's something we'll carry on doing because that's something we couldn't share on social media, and it is a bit more in depth and it gives people in our teams a chance to write something that's not quite a formal paper, but somewhere in between a blog post and a paper, so that there is some more detail about research we might have been doing or special projects we've taken on.
I think it links us back to the libraries as well. So our website forms part of the Bodleian Library's website. So when someone goes to look at the library website, they might also stumble across the conservation pages, and that way they can learn a bit about us. So that the purpose of the page is quite different to our social media accounts.
So where are you going to go from here? You're going to carry on with Twitter and Instagram, presumably. Any plans to expand into other platforms, or are you going to stick with those two for the moment?
I think we'll probably stick with those two for the moment, yeah. I think it would be a lot more work to start considering other outlets, really, unless we just share the same thing on all streams. But I think that's not a very satisfactory thing to do somehow.
Yeah. We're not going to start a conservation Snapchat.
No. And I mean, I think we're interested to see now that it's just been over a year, whether things keep on growing, and what happens over the next year. Twitter is not really, it's kind of seemed plateaued a little bit for us. Maybe perhaps we're not quite active enough on there, whereas Instagram still seems to keep on growing quite strongly. So it'd be interesting to see if that carries on over the next year. And I mean, following our presentation in Oslo as well, it'd be interesting to see whether more British studios are able to start doing the same. I mean, it would be nice if there were more, definitely the ones that we get something out of being a follower as well as posting our things. And certainly with looking at some of the studios in the States, getting an idea of how they're doing things, and occasionally even contacting people when there's something they've put up that's interesting and sharing information that way. I think we found to be really beneficial, and maybe for me a slightly unexpected benefit. And so I think it'd be nice to see if that grows more and that networking aspect of it grows more.
So are there many conservation-specific tags on Instagram, for example, or do you take part in any of the sort of Twitter events that there are, like Museum Week, or other kind of like library events or conservation events that you take part in?
Well, I don't think we have really, actually. I'm aware on Instagram there's quite a few library-specific tags. I think definitely some of the libraries in the States seem to have a weekly hashtag of different things, or like Marbling Monday or whatever, where people put up nice pictures of marbled papers, which we haven't really, we might have done once or twice, but we haven't really got involved with. Again, partly because obviously we do have those things in our collection, but that's not really saying a lot about our work as conservators. Although there's a nice kind of camaraderie around doing those things. And in terms of conservation specific hashtags, I don't know.
No, there's none I've picked up on. Often if you were to use just hashtag conservation, you might get conservationists.
Yes.
Yeah, other types of conservation popping up rather than library and museum more. We do the more generic ones sometimes, like Throwback Thursday or Flashback Friday. But no, that might be something that we'll look into for the future, because I think that might be a nice way to expand maybe Twitter especially. We did manage to do a takeover Tuesday event, which was the main Bodleian Library's Twitter account let us in conservation take over the Bodleian Library's Twitter account for the day, which was great because that really bumped up our followers. And so we planned all of our tweets for that day. We made sure we had lots of interesting images and short snippets of information linking back to our case studies on the website. And we had all of that ready for the day, which was great because that was reaching, I think the Bodleian Libraries have about 50,000 Twitter followers.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So their account is much, much greater than our 1,500 followers. But so being able to reach that number within a day, which was really great. And again, that was because we have the support from our communications team for the libraries. They seem to really like our Instagram and Twitter feeds.
So the paper that you gave at IADA, I first encountered it, in fact, on social media because I saw other people speaking about it very enthusiastically on Twitter. Are you going to publish this work anywhere?
We have thought about publishing it with IADA in their journal. We haven't got any firm plans yet to. I think we need to discuss it a little bit more because it's quite a difficult paper to publish in that way. It worked really well as a presentation because it was very image heavy and lots of videos and short videos. So to try and get that across in a paper might be quite difficult.
So put it on Instagram instead.
Yeah, we'll slowly drip feed the presentation through Instagram.
I think I was also slightly concerned before we went that maybe it just wouldn't be of interest to that many people, or at least not people who predominantly work as bench conservators. But actually, given the positive reactions we seemed to get when we were in Oslo, have kind of changed my opinion about that slightly. I was a little bit worried that we'd have a lot of people saying, "Oh, that's great, but why are you doing it? I mean, isn't that just another thing eating into your time when you could be doing the hands-on stuff?" But actually, certainly all the people who asked questions and approached us over the couple of days after we gave our paper were really quite enthusiastic about it. And I think a lot of people were able to see that, we talk about increasing our followers and so on, but it's not just because it's a game where we want to get bigger and bigger numbers. It's because public engagement is, for most conservators, one of our own aims of our profession now, is that advocacy and public engagement and public understanding of what we do will hopefully help to protect our career, and that the more people that understand what we do, the more our jobs are likely to carry on existing, and the more people can be sympathetic to the kind of regulations they might find in a library, or the lighting that they find in a gallery, or whatever it is. So I think it was, I was not so sure people would be sympathetic towards us and just think we were having a play around. But talking to people afterwards, it certainly did feel like people could see that this is part of public engagement, and that's really a major thing.
Okay, Alex Walker and Fiona McLees, thank you very much for talking to the C Word today.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And if you would like to follow the Bodleian Library's conservation team on social media, you can find them on Instagram at Bodleian Conservation and on Twitter at BodCons. And we'll put those links in our show notes, so look out for them there.
As always, if you have any questions, comments, or corrections, we'd love to hear from you. Please get in touch. Patreon shout out! Welcome to Jenny, our newest patron. Thank you so much for joining us. As usual, you can find us on patreon.com/thecword if you want to join in as well. Thanks for listening. We're the C Word, and you've been listening to Christina Rozeik, Kloe Rumsey, and me, Jenny Mathiasson. You can check out our website at thecword.show, tweet us at thecwordpodcast, or simply email us on thecwordpodcast@gmail.com. The intro and outro music is Spring by Dee Missick and used under Creative Commons Attribution License. This has been a Wooden Dice production. Yay! Customer yay.